You will never look at your own children the same way again after hearing this story. My name is Eleanor Vance, and this is the story of the dangerous game I had to play to reclaim my life. If my stories give you strength, please consider the super thanks button below this video. Now, if you are ready, walk with me down the cold, gilded hallways of betrayal. The air in the chauffeured car was chilled, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming around my heart. Outside, the gilded gates of the Golden Meadows retirement villa swung open with a silent, ominous grace. Manicured lawns, too green to be real, stretched out on either side of a winding driveway that led to a sprawling, sterile white building. It looked less like a home and more like a pristine, luxurious prison. My daughter Amelia, sitting beside me on the plush leather seat, squeezed my hand. Her touch was cold. "Isn't it beautiful, Mother?" she said, her voice a smooth, practiced melody. "It's the best. A place where you can finally rest. No more stress about the company, no more sleepless nights, just peace." Peace. The word sounded foreign. For 40 years, my life had been a whirlwind of creation, of passion, of building Vance creations from a dusty garage into a global design empire. Peace was not a concept I understood. Purpose was. "Amelia, darling," I began, my voice feeling thin. "I appreciate the thought, truly. But the 25th anniversary gala is in 3 weeks. The fall collection launch. I can't just abandon it." Amelia's smile tightened ever so slightly at the corners. "I learned from the best, remember? I can handle it." "This is not abandonment, Mother. It's a health retreat. The doctors insisted. You're exhausted." She had been saying that for weeks. "You look tired, Mother. You forgot that meeting, Mother. Maybe you should let me handle the financials for a while, Mother." Little suggestions, like tiny drops of water, slowly eroding the rock of my confidence. I, Eleanor Vance, the woman who had faced down hostile takeovers and navigated recessions, had allowed my own daughter to convince me I was fragile. We were ushered into a lobby of polished marble and towering floral arrangements that smelled faintly of lilies and disinfectant. A woman with a smile as artificial as the flowers greeted us. Amelia handled everything, speaking in low, confidential tones while I stood there, feeling like a piece of antique furniture being appraised for placement. Finally, Amelia turned to me, holding a handsome leather-bound folder. "Just a few forms, Mother. The villa's policies, consent for the wellness program, standard procedure." She opened the folder on a polished mahogany table and handed me a heavy gold-plated pen. "Just sign here and here." My hand hesitated over the crisp paper. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. It was a feeling I knew well. The same instinct that had warned me away from bad deals and untrustworthy partners for decades. But this was Amelia, my daughter, the child I had rocked to sleep, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the woman to whom I had proudly handed over the title of CEO. To doubt her felt like a betrayal of my own heart. "It seems like so many pages," I murmured, my eyes trying to scan the dense legal text. "It's just legal nonsense," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Lawyers. You know how they are. They need a forest of paper for everything. Please, Mother, the driver is waiting." The gentle pressure, the appeal to not make a fuss. It was a tactic she had learned from me, now turned against me with chilling precision. I looked into her eyes, searching for the little girl I adored, and saw only a cool, impatient reflection. Shame on me, I thought. I am being difficult. I am tired. She is trying to help. With a deep breath that felt more like a sigh of surrender, I signed, page after page. My signature, once a symbol of authority and power, now felt like an act of capitulation. I signed away my consent, my understanding, my trust. When the last page was done, I handed the pen back to her. The change was instantaneous. The moment the folder snapped shut, the mask of concern on Amelia's face dissolved. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a glint of cold, hard triumph. She stood up, her posture no longer that of a caring daughter, but of a monarch ascending to her throne. She leaned down, but not for a hug. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "The board has been informed of your retirement, effective immediately," she said, her voice a low, sharp whisper. "I've also been given power of attorney over your affairs, and your remaining shares have been transferred to the family trust, which, of course, I now control." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the words. "What? What are you talking about? You said this was a retreat." A cruel little smile played on her lips. "I said what you needed to hear. You were becoming unpredictable, a liability. The company needs a clear vision moving forward." She gestured around the opulent, empty lobby. "This isn't a retreat, Mother. It's your new home. Don't worry, you have the best suite. You've earned it." She turned and walked away without a backward glance. The sharp click of her heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots in the sudden, crushing silence. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind her, sealing my fate. I was left standing alone, the scent of lilies suddenly suffocating me. The papers I had signed were not for a wellness program. They were my abdication, my exile. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had not just pushed me out of my company. She had buried me alive in a gilded tomb. The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. But as the initial wave of pain receded, something else began to stir in the depths of my soul. Not sadness, not despair. It was a cold, quiet, and terrifying rage. And in that moment, in the silent marble heart of my new prison, I made a promise. Amelia had started this war, but I, Eleanor Vance, would be the one to finish it. Locked in my suite, a room painted in a soulless shade of beige, the past was all I had left. The silence of Golden Meadows was a stark contrast to the noise and chaos that had been my life's symphony. It all started in 1978, in a cramped, dusty garage that smelled of sawdust and turpentine. My husband Robert, a kind, gentle architect with more dreams than money, had just passed away, leaving me with a mountain of his sketches, a 5-year-old Amelia, and a heart full of grief. I was 28, and the world felt like an impossibly large and lonely place. Robert had believed that furniture should be more than functional. It should be art. He designed pieces that flowed, that had life. After he was gone, I would sit in that garage for hours, staring at his drawings, the graceful lines of a chair, the intricate carving on a table leg. Selling them felt like selling pieces of his soul. So I decided to build them instead. I had no experience, only a fierce determination to keep his memory alive. I bought a second-hand lathe and a set of chisels with what little money we had left. My hands, once soft, became calloused and strong. I worked while Amelia slept, the hum of the machinery my only companion in the dead of night. My first piece was a small 3-legged stool from one of Robert's simplest designs. It was clumsy, the legs slightly uneven, but when I finished, when I ran my hand over the polished wood, I felt him there with me. Vance Creations was born not in a boardroom, but in that dusty garage, fueled by coffee, grief, and a desperate need to survive. I sold that first stool at a local craft fair, then a small table, then a bookshelf. People were drawn to the unique designs, the quality of the craftsmanship. Word spread. Soon, I had enough orders to hire my first employee, a retired carpenter named Sam, who saw the fire in my eyes and decided to take a chance on a young widow with a garage full of dreams. Amelia grew up amidst the sawdust and the scent of wood varnish. She was my shadow, my little apprentice. I'd give her scraps of wood to sand, teaching her to feel the grain, to respect the material. Every piece of wood has a story, my love, I would tell her, holding her small hand in mine. Our job is to help it tell that story beautifully. She had a natural eye for it. She'd watch me sketch for hours, offering suggestions with a child's unfiltered honesty. That leg is too thick, Mommy. It looks clunky. And more often than not, she was right. Those were the years of sacrifice. I missed school plays because a deadline was looming. I patched our clothes and cooked simple meals to save every penny for the business. There were no vacations, no luxuries. Every dollar went back into Vance Creations, for better tools, for a larger workshop, for our first small showroom. My love for my daughter was the fire that kept me going. I wasn't just building a company, I was building her future, her legacy. I envisioned the day we would work side by side, the Vance and Daughter Creations sign hanging proudly above our door. When Amelia went to business school, I took out a second mortgage on our house to pay for it. I wanted her to have the formal education I never did. You have the artist's soul, my dear, I told her on the day she left for college. I want you to have the mind of a titan, too. She excelled, graduating at the top of her class. When she came back, she was different, more polished, more ambitious. She wore sharp suits and spoke a new language of profit margins, of scalability, of market. She saw the company not as a collection of stories told in wood, but as a series of assets and revenue streams. I was proud of her. I saw her ambition as a reflection of my own drive. I made her my vice president, my heir apparent. She was brilliant. I couldn't deny it. She streamlined production, expanded our marketing, and secured contracts I had only dreamed of. Vance Creations grew exponentially under her influence. We became a brand, a symbol of luxury and bespoke design. But in the process, something was lost. The soul. Mother, we need to outsource the carvings, she'd argue during board meetings. It's not cost-effective to have artisans do it by hand. The carvings are our signature, Amelia, I would counter. It's what makes us Vance. It's what makes us slow, she'd reply, her voice sharp with an impatience I found unsettling. We need to think bigger, faster. I gave in, time and again. I told myself I was old-fashioned, that she represented the future. I trusted her. I loved her. How could I not? I watched her become the powerful CEO I had always hoped she would be, a woman respected and feared in a world dominated by men. I slowly took a step back, handing her more and more control, believing I was securing the legacy. I was so blinded by my pride in her success that I failed to see the growing coldness in her eyes. I didn't see that she was looking past me, not as a mentor to be honored, but as an obstacle to be removed. The ultimate liability. She didn't want to share the throne. She wanted it all for herself. The greatest betrayal is always born from the deepest love, and I had loved my daughter with everything I had. I had given her my past, my present, and my future, and in return, she had given me a beige room, a gilded cage, and the cold, hard silence of a life erased. The first week in Golden Meadows was a blur of forced smiles and hollow pleasantries. My suite was impeccably furnished naturally, with pieces that were cheap imitations of my own designs, a cruel daily reminder of what had been stolen from me. The staff moved with a synthetic, rehearsed cheerfulness, calling me dear and honey in condescending tones that made my skin crawl. They treated me like a fragile doll, a porcelain relic to be handled with care, unaware of the firestorm raging behind my serene, grandmotherly facade. My days were structured around a mindless routine. Breakfast at 8, a gentle stretching class at 10, lunch at noon, followed by an afternoon of bingo or bridge. It was a life designed for waiting, for fading away gracefully. Every activity felt like a distraction, a brightly colored bandage on a festering wound. During bingo, as the cheerful caller announced B7, my mind would be elsewhere, dissecting every conversation I'd ever had with Amelia, searching for the red flags I had so blindly ignored. Her impatience, her dismissiveness of the company's artistic soul, her constant focus on rapid, soulless expansion. It had all been there, a roadmap to this gilded cage. Amelia did not visit, she didn't call. It was a complete and total severance. The first few days, a small, foolish part of my heart still hoped the phone would ring, that she would appear at my door with an explanation, a tearful apology. But as the silence stretched, hope curdled into a bitter certainty. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a coup. The initial shock, that paralyzing wave of disbelief, slowly began to recede, and in its place, a cold, hard anger started to crystallize. It was an anger unlike any I had ever known. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a fleeting argument. It was a deep, glacial rage, slow-moving but immensely powerful. I, Eleanor Vance, had not built an empire from nothing just to be discarded like a piece of outdated furniture. I had not survived the grief of losing a husband, the struggles of a single mother, and the cutthroat world of business to be defeated by my own blood. The turning point came during a mandatory art therapy session. We were given watercolors and told to paint our feelings. The other residents, widows and widowers with gentle, resigned eyes, painted soft landscapes and muted flowers. I picked up a brush, dipped it in the deepest crimson, and painted a single, jagged crack down the center of my paper. Then I painted another and another until the page was a chaotic web of fractures. The therapist, a young woman named Brenda with a perpetually placid smile, came over to my easel. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "That looks very broken." I looked her straight in the eye, my voice low and steady. "It is. But the beauty of a fracture, Brenda, is that it shows you exactly where the weakness was. And once you see it, you can begin to rebuild. But this time, you build it stronger." Her smile faltered. For the first time, she saw not a confused old woman, but someone else entirely. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and started becoming a strategist. My mind, which had been dulled by grief and shock, began to sharpen. I was isolated but not powerless. They had taken my company, my money, and my freedom, but they had left me with my most valuable asset, my mind. The mind that had designed 1,000 pieces of furniture, that had negotiated 100 contracts, that had built a legacy from sawdust and dreams. It was time to put that mind to work. I began to observe. I learned the staff's routines, their shift changes, who was lazy, who was compassionate, who was susceptible to a little flattery. I identified the weak links in my prison's chain. My first target was a young orderly named Carlos. He was a kind boy, a student working his way through college, and he often spoke of his struggles with tuition. One afternoon, during my state-sanctioned quiet time, I called him into my suite. "Carlos," I said, my voice warm and grandmotherly, "I have a small favor to ask. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and I'm having trouble with this new tablet my daughter left me. I was hoping you could help me look something up." He agreed readily, happy to help the sweet old lady in suite 312. "Of course, Mrs. Vance. What do you need?" "I just want to keep up with the business news," I said innocently. "Could you look up Vance Creations for me? I like to see how they're doing." As he typed, I watched his face. The news was not good. The headline spoke of a bold new direction for the company. Amelia was everywhere, a photogenic CEO on the cover of business magazines, talking about disrupting the legacy market and aggressive global expansion. But beneath the glossy headlines, the financial reports told a different story. The stock price was volatile. Analysts were skeptical of her rapid changes. She was selling off assets, properties I had painstakingly acquired over decades, to fund a massive, risky venture in the Asian market. She was gutting the company, my company, selling its bones to finance her own ego. She wasn't building on my legacy. She was setting it on fire to warm her hands. "Thank you, Carlos," I said, hiding the tremor in my hands. "That's all for now." Before he left, I pressed $100 bill into his hand. "For your trouble, and for your tuition." His eyes widened. "Mrs. Vance, I can't take this." "Nonsense," I insisted. "An old woman has to do something with her pocket money. And please, if you could bring me the financial papers every morning, it would be a great help. I'll make it worth your while." It was a small act of rebellion, my first move on the chessboard. Carlos became my secret courier, my lifeline to the outside world. Every morning, tucked inside my breakfast tray, was a neatly folded financial newspaper. The shock I had felt was now completely gone, replaced by a burning, all-consuming fury. The rage gave me a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Amelia had made a fatal error. She had locked me away, but she had assumed my mind was as frail as she had told everyone my body was. She had forgotten who I was. I was not just a founder, I was a fighter, and my war was just beginning. My mornings in that beige prison were dedicated to one thing: study. Carlos, my young, unwitting accomplice, would deliver the financial news with my oatmeal, and I would devour the pages with a hunger no breakfast could satisfy. I charted stock fluctuations on the back of bingo cards. I memorized the names of analysts and board members. I was a general studying the battlefield from a remote outpost, and the picture that emerged was deeply disturbing. Amelia was a whirlwind of activity, a darling of the business press. "Amelia Vance's audacious vision," one headline blared. "Vance Creations sheds its old skin," proclaimed another. To the world, she was a revolutionary. To me, she was an arsonist burning down a cathedral to build a shopping mall. She was liquidating assets I had spent a lifetime acquiring: small historic workshops in Italy, a timber preserve in Oregon that guaranteed our access to the finest walnut, the very heartwood of the company. She was trading substance for speed, soul for stock points. But why? The scale of the sell-off didn't make sense. It was too much, too fast. It wasn't restructuring, it was a fire sale. The first real clue came not from a newspaper, but from a ghost. A bouquet of funereal white lilies arrived for me one afternoon. The card simply read, "Thinking of you, from the team at Vance Creations." The gesture was as cold and impersonal as everything else in this place. But as I went to throw the card away, my fingers brushed against a thickness in the cardstock. It was two-layered. With trembling fingers, I carefully peeled the front from the back. Tucked inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. The handwriting was a familiar, elegant script. It was from Clara, my personal assistant for over 30 years, a woman so loyal she was practically family. Amelia had forced her into early retirement a week after my health retreat began. The note was short, cryptic, and terrifying. "Eleanor, she's selling the heart. Look at the public records for the old Westfield property. She's not just moving forward, she's trying to erase you. Yours always, C, the Westfield property." My breath caught in my chest. It wasn't our most valuable asset in terms of money, but it was our most precious. It was the site of our first real factory, the one we built after moving out of the garage. It was where I had hired Sam, my first employee. It was where a 10-year-old Amelia had her own little workbench. Selling it was like selling our family history, our origin story. "She's trying to erase you." The words resonated with a chilling truth. This wasn't just business, It was matricide by 1,000 corporate cuts. I needed proof. I needed access to public records, something beyond the sanitized news reports. I needed Carlos again, but this would be a much bigger risk for him. That evening, I waited for him to do his final rounds. "Carlos," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I need another favor, a much more important one." I explained what I needed. The library here has a public computer. After hours, when no one is around, I need you to search the city's property records for the Vance Creations Westfield site. He looked terrified. "Mrs. Vance, I could get fired." I looked him in the eye, my gaze steady. "Carlos, my daughter is destroying my life's work. She has taken everything from me based on lies. You are a good boy, studying to make a life for yourself. You believe in right and wrong. What she is doing is wrong." I opened the small safe in my suite, a ridiculous feature for a place where residents had no possessions of value, and took out $500 in cash. "This is for your tuition and for your courage." He stared at the money, then at my face. He saw not a senile old woman, but a queen in exile asking for one last loyal service. He nodded slowly. "Tonight," he whispered, "after midnight." The hours crawled by. I sat in the dark, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. At 2 a.m, a piece of paper was slipped silently under my door. I snatched it up. It was a printout from the city registrar's website, a deed of sale. The Westfield property had been sold 2 weeks ago for a fraction of its market value. It was sold to a company I had never heard of, AV Holdings LLC, AV Amelia Vance. It was a shell corporation, a legal ghost, created to hide the transaction. She was selling the company's assets to herself, stripping it bare for pennies on the dollar, funneling its worth into her own private accounts. The risky venture in Asia, the aggressive expansion, it was all a smokescreen. She wasn't just gutting the company to fund a gamble, she was looting it. She was stealing not only its future, but its past, piece by precious piece, and leaving an empty shell behind. And the gala, the grand 25th anniversary celebration, was her deadline. She would announce her grand vision, her massive new deal, using the last of the company's credibility as a stage, and by the time anyone realized the truth, she and the money would be long gone. I was sitting on a mountain of secrets, but I was still trapped. I had the what, but I had no how. How could I, a prisoner in a luxury nursing home, stop a powerful CEO from completing the perfect corporate crime? I needed more than a kind-hearted orderly. I needed a giant. I needed a ghost from the company's past even more powerful than Clara. There was only one man who knew the company's secrets as well as I did, a man whose loyalty I had never had cause to doubt. Marcus Thorne. He was the first person I had hired with a college degree, a brilliant, numbers-obsessed young accountant who could see poetry in a balance sheet. I mentored him, and he rose through the ranks to become the company's chief financial officer, my financial right hand for nearly 30 years. He was a man of quiet integrity, a rock of stability in the often volatile world of high-end design. Marcus had retired a year ago, reluctantly, saying he wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren. But I knew the real reason. He couldn't stand to watch Amelia dismantle the company's core values, which he, as much as I, held sacred. But contacting him would be a monumental risk. My communications were almost certainly monitored. A direct call was out of the question. I needed a way to reach him that was untraceable, a message from a ghost. I spent 2 days thinking, my mind working like a master locksmith, searching for the one unguarded keyhole. And then I remembered. The chess club. Marcus was a fanatical chess player. Every Thursday, he met with a group of other retirees at the city library for a series of games. It was a ritual as sacred to him as his morning coffee. and the library, I knew, had a public bulletin board in its lobby. It was a long shot, a desperate, old-fashioned message in a bottle. The next morning, I feigned a dizzy spell during the gentle stretching class. "Oh my!" I gasped, clutching my head dramatically. "I think I need some fresh air. Brenda, dear, could you call my daughter? I think she should know." The call worked exactly as I'd planned. It sent a ripple of mild panic through the staff, who were terrified of anything happening to a resident on their watch. It also served another purpose. It would make my subsequent actions seem like the befuddled wanderings of a sick old woman. Later that day, feigning a desire for a book, I had Carlos escort me to the Golden Meadows Library, a sad little room with dusty, unread classics. While he was distracted by a nurse, I slipped a small note I had written into my pocket. "Carlos," I whispered when he returned, "I feel so much better. The air in this place is so stuffy. Would you be a dear and walk with me in the garden?" The garden was a sterile, circular path, but it ran along the low fence at the edge of the property. As we walked, I continued my performance, sighing and talking about my spells. Near a large azalea bush that obscured the view of the security cameras, I stumbled again, this time more convincingly. "Oh dear, my ankle!" As Carlos rushed to help me, my hand darted into my pocket, and I tucked the note deep into the soil at the base of the bush. I'm all right," I said, recovering quickly. "Just a little shaky. Let's go back inside." The note contained a simple, coded message only Marcus would understand. "The Queen's Gambit has been declined. Need to discuss endgame strategy. Thursday, same time, same place." It was signed E. The Queen's Gambit was our private joke for Amelia's aggressive business strategies. Endgame was our code for retirement planning, but most importantly, it was an appeal to the Grandmaster in him. The next 2 days were agonizing. Had he found it? Had a gardener discovered it and thrown it away? Had I been seen? Then Thursday morning my breakfast arrived. Tucked beneath the napkin was a tiny chess piece, a white knight. My heart leaped. The knight, the piece that moves in an L shape, the unexpected angle of attack. It was his signal. He was in. He understood. That afternoon I waited. I knew Marcus was at the library, and I knew what he would do. At exactly 3 o'clock, the main phone at the nurse's station rang. I heard the receptionist answer. "Golden Meadows, how can I help you?" "Yes, she's a resident here. One moment." A nurse came to my door. "Eleanor, it's for you. A Mr. Blackwood from the library's Historical Society." Mr. Blackwood. A nod to the black and white squares of the board. I took the call on the public phone in the hallway, my hands slick with sweat. "Eleanor Vance speaking." "Mrs. Vance," came Marcus's familiar, steady voice, disguised with a slightly gruff tone. "I'm calling about a historical query. We're researching the foundation of prominent local businesses. I understand you founded Vance Creations?" "Yes, that's correct," I said, playing my part. "A long time ago." "We'd be honored if you'd allow us to conduct a short oral history interview for our archives. Would you be available tomorrow? Say at 10 in the morning? We can send a car." It was brilliant. A visit that was official, sanctioned, and completely above suspicion. Amelia would be notified, of course, but she would see it as a harmless vanity project for a forgotten old woman. She would never suspect that the historian coming to interview me was the one man who could help me bring her down. The next morning, I was waiting in the lobby when Marcus arrived. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He carried a briefcase and played the part of the slightly fussy academic perfectly. We were shown to a private sunroom for the interview. The moment the door closed, the act dropped. "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My God, what has she done to you?" "She has made a very, very big mistake, Marcus," I replied, my voice hard as steel. She has underestimated her mother. I laid it all out for him. The stolen shares, the power of attorney, the shell corporation, the systematic looting of the company. I showed him the printout of the Westfield sale. He studied the documents, his face growing darker with every word I spoke. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on the table. I knew it, he finally whispered. I knew she was reckless, but I never thought, This is not business, Eleanor. This is theft. It's desecration. She plans to announce a massive partnership with an Asian conglomerate at the 25th anniversary gala, I explained. It's her grand finale. She'll use the last of the company's good name to secure a deal that will make her personally rich and then disappear, leaving the husk of Vance Creations to collapse. The gala, he mused, his mind already working, the old fire back in his eyes. That's our deadline and our stage. He looked at me, a grim smile forming on his lips. She's forgotten about Article 7, Section B of the corporate bylaws, hasn't she? My heart began to pound. Article 7, Section B. The Founders Clause? A piece of legal poetry I had insisted my lawyers include when I first incorporated the company. A clause to protect it from exactly this kind of hostile, internal takeover. It had been so long, I had almost forgotten it myself. She thinks it's just sentimental nonsense, I said. She probably never even read it. Well, Marcus said, leaning forward, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. We're about to give her a history lesson she will never forget. The alliance was forged, the ghost and the giant, my mind and his access. We were no longer just two retirees. We were the resistance. Our weekly oral history sessions became the covert headquarters for our counteroffensive. To any nurse passing by the sunroom, we were just a kindly old historian and a resident reminiscing about the past. In reality, we were a two-person war council plotting the downfall of a corporate queen. Marcus would arrive with his briefcase, seemingly filled with historical documents, but actually containing encrypted flash drives and burner phones. My beige suite, once a symbol of my imprisonment, was transformed into the office of a shadow CEO. Article 7, Section B, I murmured one morning, reciting the clause from memory as I paced the plush carpet. Marcus and I had spent hours dissecting its legal strength. It was a masterpiece of corporate self-defense, designed by a younger, more paranoid version of myself. In the event the company faces insolvency or a hostile takeover initiated by a majority shareholder, the founder, Eleanor Vance, reserves the right to reclaim all voting shares for a period of 90 days to restore fiscal stability. The buyback price shall be $1. It was an emergency button, a corporate ejector seat. Amelia, in her arrogant rush to consolidate power, had seen me, the founder, as a person to be neutralized. She had forgotten that the founder was also a legal entity, a ghost in the machine with powers she couldn't comprehend. She's not just a majority shareholder, Marcus clarified, looking over a complex flow chart he had drawn on a notepad. By transferring your shares into a trust she controls, she has effectively initiated a hostile takeover from within. And by selling assets to her own shell corporation, she is deliberately driving the company toward insolvency. She is triggering the clause herself, and she is too arrogant to see it. Our plan was elegant in its simplicity and audacious in its execution. We wouldn't just expose Amelia, we would use her own greed as the mechanism of her destruction. The goal was to push Vance Creations to the very brink of bankruptcy, making it appear worthless. Then, at the gala, at the moment of her greatest triumph, we would trigger the Founders Clause, and I would buy back my entire empire for $1. First, Marcus said, tapping his pen on a list of names. We need to control the debt. He explained that Amelia, in her rush, had taken out several large, short-term loans to maintain the illusion of cash flow while she was liquidating the physical assets. The loans were held by 3 different financial institutions. If we can buy that debt, he explained, we become the creditor. We can call in the loans at the most inconvenient time possible for her, like, say, in the middle of her big anniversary speech. But how could we, 2 retirees, buy millions of dollars in corporate debt? The answer, again, came from the past. Over the years, I had quietly cultivated a network of allies, artisans, and small business owners I had helped, investors whose careers I had launched. These were people who valued loyalty and integrity over Amelia's brand of ruthless modernism. Marcus began to make discreet calls from his burner phone, speaking in hushed tones. He called them the Friends of Robert Vance, appealing not to their wallets, but to their sense of justice and their memory of the company's honorable beginnings. One by one, they agreed. A textile magnate in North Carolina, a lumber baron in Washington, a retired venture capitalist in New York. Working through a series of anonymous holding companies set up by a trusted lawyer, they began to buy up Amelia's debt. It was a silent, invisible siege. On paper, Vance Creations was simply restructuring its loans. In reality, the noose was tightening. My role was to be the architect of the narrative. I began to write. Not letters, not emails, but stories. From my suite, using a tablet Carlos had smuggled in, I started a secret, anonymous blog called The Gilded Sawdust. I wrote about the soul of craftsmanship, about the decline of integrity in modern business, about a once great design house that was losing its way. I never mentioned Vance Creations by name, but the allusions were unmistakable to anyone in the industry. I wrote about a soulless CEO who traded history for headlines, who sold the company's heartwood for a quick profit. The blog went viral in the niche world of high-end design. It was picked up by industry journals and influential critics. It started a conversation, a wave of nostalgia for the old Vance, the company that stood for quality and artistry. It was a subtle, psychological attack, eroding Amelia's credibility, framing her bold new vision not as innovative, but as a betrayal. I was creating the perfect emotional backdrop for her eventual fall. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on the gala itself. He learned through his contacts that Amelia had hired a top-tier event production company and was planning to live-stream the entire event, including her keynote address, where she would announce the massive partnership with Omnicorp Asia. The livestream was her ultimate vanity project, a way to broadcast her triumph to the entire world. It was also the perfect delivery system for our revenge. "She's handing us the gun, the bullet, and the camera to film it all," Marcus said, a rare, wolfish grin on his face during one of our history sessions. Our final piece of the puzzle was the most delicate. We needed to ensure that when the company's financial crisis hit, it hit with the force of a tidal wave. Marcus used our anonymous holding companies to place massive short positions against Vance Creations stock, betting on its collapse. It was a high-risk gamble, but it would amplify the financial devastation exponentially when the news broke. With less than a week to go until the gala, every piece was in place. The debt was ours. The narrative was set. The financial trap was baited. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The rage was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it had been forged into something sharp and focused. I was no longer the grieving mother or the discarded founder. I was a creator once more. But I wasn't building furniture. I was building a reckoning, and it was going to be my final and most exquisite masterpiece. The week leading up to the gala was the longest of my life. From the gilded silence of my suite I could feel the invisible gears of our trap grinding into place. Each day brought a new report from Marcus, a new piece of the intricate machinery of our revenge locking into its assigned position. He would deliver the news during our history sessions, his voice a low, steady murmur that belied the corporate warfare we were waging. "The friends of Robert Vance have officially acquired the last of the outstanding debt," he reported one morning, sliding a document across the table. "We own every loan, every line of credit. Amelia is now, for all intents and purposes, working for us. She just doesn't know it." "And the stock?" I asked, my heart thrumming. "The short positions are in place," he confirmed. "We have bet heavily on the company's failure. When the news of the debt recall breaks, the stock will nosedive. The financial press will call it a catastrophic failure of leadership, the final, fatal misstep of an arrogant CEO." It was a strange feeling to be actively plotting the destruction of the very thing I had built. It felt like a controlled demolition, a painful but necessary act to save the foundation from a corrupt structure. For Vance Creations to live, Amelia's version of it had to die. My anonymous blog, The Gilded Sawdust, had become a sensation. I wrote my final pre-gala post, a melancholic piece titled "Remembering the Grain." It was a tribute to the artisans, the designers, and the dreamers who had built the industry, a subtle eulogy for the company I had founded. "True legacy is not found in a stock ticker," I wrote. "It is found in the hands that shape the wood, in the soul of the creation. When a company sells its soul, no amount of profit can buy it back." The post was shared thousands of times, creating a groundswell of sentiment that perfectly primed the audience for Amelia's fall. They wouldn't see it as a corporate maneuver. They would see it as karmic justice. Inside Golden Meadows, I played my part to perfection. I was the picture of gentle decline. I attended bingo, but made clumsy mistakes. I joined the watercolor class and painted blurry, indistinct shapes. I spoke to the nurses in a slightly more forgetful, slightly more distracted tone. I was building my alibi, ensuring that when the dust settled, no one would ever suspect that the architect of Amelia's downfall was a resident of the memory care wing. 2 days before the gala, Amelia finally called. It was the first time I had heard her voice in nearly a month. Her tone was artificially bright, oozing a condescending sweetness that turned my stomach. "Mother, I just wanted to check in," she said. "I know things have been difficult, but I want you to know I'm thinking of you. The gala is in 2 days. It's going to be a historic night for the company. Our company." "That's lovely, dear," I replied, my voice a frail whisper. "I do hope it goes well." "I've arranged for the gala to be streamed on the television in your common room," she continued, her magnanimity a nauseating performance. "So you'll be able to watch my speech. You'll be so proud." "Oh, Amelia," I said, injecting a note of confused pathos. That's so thoughtful, but I get so tired. I'll probably be in bed." "Of course," she said, the relief in her voice palpable. The last thing she wanted was her senile mother being a topic of conversation on her big night. "You just rest. I'll handle everything." "I know you will, darling," I said. And for a moment, the line between my performance and my reality blurred. I felt a wave of profound, soul-deep sadness for the daughter I had lost, for the woman she had become. "I know you will." The call was a critical piece of the plan. It confirmed that she believed I was oblivious, defeated, and utterly irrelevant. She would never see the blow coming. The day of the gala, a strange, electric calm settled over me. While the staff of Golden Meadows was preparing for their Friday night movie, I was preparing for war. Marcus had delivered the final piece of our arsenal the day before. A simple, elegant black dress, my old pearl necklace, and a small, discreet earpiece. At 6 o'clock, I feigned a headache and retired to my room. telling the nurses I wouldn't be down for dinner. The moment the door was locked, I began to transform. I shed the meek, beige persona of the Golden Meadows resident. I styled my own hair, applying the subtle makeup I had always worn as a CEO. When I put on the black dress and the pearls, I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman I hadn't seen in months. It was Eleanor Vance, not the mother, not the widow, the founder. I placed the tiny earpiece in my ear. At 7 o'clock it crackled to life. "The historian is in position," Marcus's voice whispered. "How are you feeling, my friend?" "I feel like I'm about to buy back my company," I replied, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Through the earpiece, Marcus gave me a play-by-play. "The guests are arriving. The press is everywhere. I see the Omnicorp Asia executives. They look pleased. They have no idea they're about to make a deal with a bankrupt company." He had arranged for a car to be waiting for me at a service entrance at the back of the property, a blind spot in the security coverage. My escape was planned for 8:45, time to get me to the gala precisely at the moment of maximum chaos. At 8 o'clock the live stream began on my tablet. I watched as the camera panned across the glittering ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel. Hundreds of people, the movers and shakers of the design and finance worlds, mingled under crystal chandeliers. It was the grand stage Amelia had built for her coronation. She moved through the crowd like a conqueror, radiant in a blood-red dress, accepting congratulations, her laughter echoing with the hollow ring of triumph. My creation, my beautiful company, had been turned into a backdrop for a thief's victory party. The anger returned hot and sharp, chasing away the last of my nerves. This wasn't just about business. It was about justice. It was for Robert. It was for the legacy. It was for the girl who dared to build a dream in a dusty garage. The trap was set. The players were in position. The world was watching. And the queen, my daughter, was about to walk unknowingly into my checkmate. The ballroom glittered. It was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and the flash of diamonds. I watched it all on my tablet, a silent observer from my beige prison cell a few miles away. The production value of the gala was breathtakingly high. Amelia had spared no expense. Towering ice sculptures carved in the shape of our company logo dripped slowly under the hot lights, their demise a perfect, unintended metaphor for the evening. A string quartet played in the corner, their elegant music a flimsy veil over the corporate savagery about to unfold. Through my earpiece, Marcus was my guide to the battlefield. He moved through the crowd, a glass of champagne in hand, playing the part of a benign, retired executive. "The board members are all here," he murmured, his voice a calm counterpoint to the orchestral music. "They look like fat, happy cats. They've been promised a huge return on the Omnicorp deal. The Omnicorp delegation is holding court by the bar. Their CEO, Mr. Tanaka, is smiling. He thinks he's about to buy the crown jewel of American design for a bargain." I saw Amelia on the screen, a goddess in red, laughing as she charmed a circle of reporters. She spoke of synergy, disruption, and a bold new chapter. Her words were meaningless, a cloud of corporate jargon designed to obscure the simple, brutal truth. She was a thief, and this was her coronation. Every smile, every confident gesture was a twist of the knife in my heart. She wasn't just taking my company, she was taking my story, rewriting it with herself as the hero. "The stage is set," I whispered into the tiny microphone on my dress. "Is everything ready on your end?" "The wire transfers are queued," Marcus confirmed. "The moment I give the signal, the holding companies will officially call in their loans. All of them, simultaneously. The legal notices are drafted and will be electronically filed with the courts and the SEC at precisely the same moment. The financial system will register Vance Creations as insolvent within 90 seconds. It was a corporate blitzkrieg, a perfectly synchronized attack designed to create maximum chaos and leave no room for countermaneuvers. At 8:45, it was time. I stood up, smoothed down my black dress, and took a deep breath. I walked to the door of my suite and slipped out, unseen. The hallway was empty. I moved silently, a ghost in my own prison, down the service corridor to the rear exit. The night air was cool on my skin. A black town car was waiting exactly as planned, its engine purring. The driver, a trusted associate of one of the friends of Robert Vance, opened the door for me without a word. As the car pulled away from Golden Meadows, I didn't look back. I was leaving my tomb, and I was on my way to a resurrection. The ride to the hotel was surreal. I watched the city lights blur past, my reflection a pale, determined specter in the window. Through the earpiece, I could hear the gala's master of ceremonies introducing my daughter. "And now," the MC's booming voice announced, "it is my great honor to introduce the visionary who is leading this legacy brand into a bold new future, the CEO of Vance Creations, Ms. Amelia Vance." The ballroom erupted in applause. I saw her walk onto the stage, bathed in a spotlight, a vision of triumph. She approached the podium, her smile wide and radiant. Thank you," she began, her voice resonating with practiced confidence. 25 years ago, my mother, Eleanor Vance, started this company in a garage. She built it with passion and integrity. Today, we honor that legacy by not being afraid to reinvent it, to make it stronger, faster, and more global than she ever dreamed. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost sublime. She was using my name, my legacy, as a pedestal for her own grand theft. "Tonight," she continued, her voice rising with excitement, "I am thrilled to announce the single largest partnership in our company's history, a multi-billion-dollar deal with Omnicorp Asia that will redefine the luxury market and solidify Vance Creations' place as a dominant global force for the next century." More applause. I saw Mr. Tanaka from Omnicorp nod approvingly, a satisfied smile on his face. The trap was about to spring. "The time is now, Marcus," I whispered into my mic as the car pulled up to the hotel's main entrance. "Signal sent," he replied. "The dominoes are falling." In the ballroom, Amelia was beaming, basking in the glow of her supposed triumph. She raised a glass. "To the future," she declared. At that exact moment, a series of phones began to buzz throughout the room. I saw board members, investors, and reporters pull out their devices, their expressions shifting from celebration to confusion and then to outright panic. "What's happening, Marcus?" I asked as I stepped out of the car. "Check your tablet," he said, his voice laced with grim satisfaction. "The news is breaking." I looked at my screen. The headlines were brutal. Vance Creations defaults on loans. SEC filing shows insolvency. Stock plunges in after hours. Trading. Amelia Vance's Omnicorp deal dead on arrival. On the stage, Amelia's smile had frozen. She could see the chaos erupting in the audience. Her chief operating officer was rushing towards the stage, his face white as a sheet, frantically whispering in her ear. Her triumphant speech had turned to ash in her mouth. The glorious future she had promised had evaporated in the space of 90 seconds. The stage was now perfectly set, not for her coronation, but for my return. The hotel's massive oak doors swung open before me. I walked in, no longer the forgotten old woman from the nursing home, but the founder, and I was about to reclaim my kingdom. A hush fell over the ballroom as I entered. It was not a silence of respect, but of profound, collective shock. The sight of me, Eleanor Vance, the woman who was supposed to be safely tucked away in a nursing home, suffering from dementia, standing in the grand entrance, poised and powerful in my black dress, was a narrative-shattering event. The frantic whispers turned to stunned silence. Every eye in the room swiveled from the chaos on the stage to me. I walked forward, my steps slow and deliberate. The click of my sensible heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the vast room. It felt like walking through water, every face a frozen tableau of disbelief. I saw the Omnicorp executives, their mouths agape. I saw the board members, their faces ashen. And on the stage, I saw Amelia. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The blood had drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a terrified porcelain doll. The triumphant CEO had vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. This was not part of her plan. I was a ghost at her feast, a specter of a past she thought she had successfully buried. "Mother?" she stammered into the microphone, the word echoing through the silent ballroom. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting?" I finished for her, my voice calm and clear, amplified by the room's perfect acoustics. I walked to the foot of the stage and looked up at my daughter, not with hatred, but with a cold, surgical pity. I was, but I found the accommodations lacking in integrity, much like the current leadership of this company. A collective gasp went through the audience. This was no longer a corporate event. It was high drama, and everyone had a front row seat. Marcus, my loyal knight, stepped forward from the crowd. He was no longer playing the part of a harmless retiree. He held a sheaf of papers, and his face was grim. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with an authority he had not used in years. "As the former CFO of this company, and as a concerned party, I regret to inform you that Vance Creations is, as of 9:02 this evening, officially insolvent." Panic erupted. Shouts, questions, the frantic rustle of people checking their phones again. Amelia grabbed the microphone, her composure shattering. "That's a lie. This is a trick. He's a disgruntled former employee. Mother, he's manipulating you." "She's not well." I held up a hand, and miraculously the room quieted again. "I have never been better, Amelia, or clearer. You see, you were right about one thing. This company needed to be saved from its old-fashioned, sentimental founder, but you were wrong about who that was." I turned to the stunned audience. "For the past month, my own daughter has systematically looted the company I built. She sold off its most precious assets, including the historic Westfield property, to a shell corporation she herself controls, AV Holdings." I nodded to Marcus, who projected the deed of sale from the Westfield property onto the massive screens behind the stage. The same screens that moments before had been showing a glossy tribute to Amelia's vision, the name AV. Holdings LLC was there for all to see. "She has taken on massive debt to hide her theft," I continued, my voice ringing with the clarity of truth. "Debt that, as of 10 minutes ago, was called in by the new creditors. She has driven this company into the ground, all to finance a fraudulent deal with Omnicorp and enrich herself." Mr. Tanaka of Omnicorp stood up, his face a thundercloud. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It is," Marcus confirmed. "The company you were about to partner with is worthless, a hollowed-out shell." Amelia was now openly sobbing, a desperate, cornered animal. "No, no, this is my company. I'm the CEO." "Not anymore," I said, delivering the final, fatal blow. "Marcus, would you be so kind as to remind our former CEO about Article 7, Section B of the corporate bylaws?" Marcus smiled grimly. "The Founder's Clause," he announced to the bewildered audience. "A clause that states, in the event of insolvency or a hostile internal takeover, the founder has the right to reclaim all voting shares to restore stability." I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single, crisp $1 bill. I walked up the steps of the stage, approached the podium where my daughter stood broken, and placed the dollar bill down on its polished surface. "I am exercising that right," I declared, my voice echoing with 40 years of love, of sacrifice, and now of righteous fury. "I am reclaiming my company. As of this moment, I am the sole voting shareholder of Vance Creations, and my first act is to inform Ms. Amelia Vance that her employment is terminated, effective immediately." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a public execution. Amelia stared at the dollar bill as if it were a venomous snake. Then she looked at me, her eyes filled not with remorse, but with pure, undiluted hatred. In that moment, I knew I had not just lost my daughter, but that she had never truly been mine to begin with. She was a stranger who had worn my daughter's face. I took the microphone from her limp hand. "Security," I said, my voice as firm as oak. "Please escort this woman from the premises." 2 security guards moved towards the stage. As they led a hysterical, screaming Amelia away, the live stream cameras followed her every humiliating step. The world was watching her downfall, just as she had intended for them to watch her triumph. The gala was indeed a historic night, but it wasn't the beginning of her new chapter. It was the explosive, spectacular, and just end of her reign. The founder had returned, and the house that Eleanor built was hers once more. The aftermath of the gala was not a firestorm, it was an earthquake. It shook the foundations of the city's business community. The headlines the next morning were sensational. "The Vance Empire crumbles at gala," one screamed. But by noon, the narrative had shifted. "The founder returns. Eleanor Vance reclaims company for $1. My story was on every news channel, every business journal. I was no longer the forgotten relic. I was the comeback queen, the grandmaster who had executed the most stunning checkmate the corporate world had seen in decades. Amelia's fall was as swift as it was brutal. The SEC launched a full-scale investigation into her shell corporation and the fraudulent asset sales. Faced with irrefutable evidence and public humiliation, the board members who had once championed her turned on her with savage speed. She was facing charges of embezzlement, corporate fraud, and securities violations. Her assets were frozen, her reputation destroyed. I heard from Clara that she had sold her lavish penthouse and was living in a small, rented apartment, a pariah in the same social circles where she had once reigned as a princess. She had gambled everything for a kingdom, and was left with nothing but the rubble of her own greed. I felt no joy in her ruin, only a profound and weary sadness for the brilliant woman she could have been. My first day back at the Vance Creations headquarters was surreal. As I walked through the doors I had first opened 40 years ago, the employees gathered in the main lobby. They were uncertain, scared. They had witnessed the public execution of their CEO and did not know what to expect. They applauded. It started as a trickle, then grew into a thunderous ovation. They were applauding not just me, but the return of the company's soul. My first act was to rehire Clara and all the other loyal, long-serving employees Amelia had callously dismissed. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of rebuilding. With Marcus by my side, we worked tirelessly to undo the damage. We canceled the disastrous Omnicorp deal. We used the Friends of Robert Vance network to secure stable, long-term financing. We fought to buy back the historic workshops and the Oregon timber preserve Amelia had sold. We brought the heart and soul back to Vance Creations. I didn't run the company with the frantic energy of my youth, but with the quiet, focused wisdom of my age. I reinstated the artisan programs, focused on quality over quantity, and reminded everyone, from the boardroom to the workshop floor, that we didn't just sell furniture, we sold stories. But I knew this was not my final chapter. I had not fought my way out of one prison only to build another for myself, no matter how beautiful. I had reclaimed my company not to rule it, but to save it. Once it was stable, once the foundation was strong again, I began to build its new future, a future that did not depend solely on me. I created a new leadership structure, an executive committee led by Marcus Thorne as the new CEO. I established an employee trust, making every single worker a part owner in the company they helped build, ensuring that its legacy would be protected by the many, not gambled away by the few. My true retirement came on a quiet Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after the gala. There was no press conference, no grand announcement. I simply signed the final papers, handing over control to the new board, and walked out of the building for the last time. I didn't go back to the sterile luxury of Golden Meadows. I sold my large family home and bought a small cottage on the coast, a place where I could smell the salt in the air and hear the ocean from my window. I built a small workshop in the back, just for me. Here, I create again, not for profit, not for legacy, but for joy. I work with my hands, feeling the grain of the wood, telling the stories I want to tell. Some days I build a simple, elegant chair. Other days, I just sit on my porch and watch the tide roll in, a cup of tea in my hands. I am no longer a CEO, no longer a prisoner, no longer a warrior. I am simply Eleanor, free. And so, this is how I was reborn from my own ashes. They thought they could take everything from me, but they forgot the most precious thing I owned, my honor and my strength. And what about you? Have you ever had to face a betrayal so profound in your own life? Share your story and where in the world you're listening from in the comments below. Knowing there are other brave souls like you gives me strength. Remember, even after the darkest night, the sun will rise again. Close your eyes and remember your own power until the next story.